All right, so let's jump in with the starter code that I gave you, and we'll just sort of look and see what we have going on. I basically have 6 divs, and they're just divs. That's all I have going on. And since by nature they are block elements, they are currently taking up the full width that they're allowed. They're allowed the full width of the page because I haven't made the parent, which is the menu, smaller. So menu's taking up 100%. That means the children are currently taking up 100%. And I have 6 of them. And then if you look here, I just have some styling to differentiate the different divs. I did also style it with 2 classes because you can. So I style it so that all of them have a box class so that I can assign text align center to all of them. But then I give each of them a unique class so that I can make them look unique. So this is 2 classes. As long as you separate the classes by a space, this being one class and this being another class, you can provide more than one class to any element. So this one has a shared box class that they all will have whatever you put inside the box styling. And then I gave each one a different color. So that's really all I did to set it up. And now let's talk about Flexbox and how it's going to work. So I gave you a link to, in fact, it's right here in your starter files, to W3 Schools, which is going to help us walk through how Flexbox works. All right, so if you follow the link that I gave you, it's going to end up here at W3 Schools. And the first thing we have to think about is parent-children relationship, because we want to differentiate, or we have different properties that we give to, here the words container, my word is parent. So we have container or parent, and we also have children or items. So they're very different, and they each get their own set of properties and styling, so we need to be aware of the differences. So I'm going to start off here with Flex Container, and it says display flex without a whole lot of description. So let me start by going back to, I'm going to go to this live page that we have here. And on this page, I simply have the 6 elements, and they're taking up the full width of the screen that they are set in. So by default, menu is 100%. That's the parent of all of these children. And the menu is taking up 100%, so is each of the children, because the children sort of inherit whatever's happening from the parent container. That being said, if our parent is menu, then what we're going to do is apply that display flex to our parent. And you're going to see right off the bat we're seeing some changes, and that is that they've all sort of lined up here to the left in columns as opposed to the rows that they were in a moment ago. All right, so now all the children are standing at attention, if you will. They are all being flexed because they are children of our menu, which we put display flex on. So let's look at W3 Schools again. It gives us this conversation that, first of all, once we do display flex and we identify the parent, which we just did with our menu, then we have all of these options that we can apply to our parent. In other words, to our menu in our case, because that's display flex. We've sort of declared this is the parent of our flex box, of our group that we're flexing. So what we're going to do then is we're going to look at some of these kind of individually. I'm not going to do all of them. I'll let you kind of experiment with them, but let's just sort of look and see how it works. So it says flex direction, and what you'll find, let me just kind of show you how the documentation here works. It says flex direction, and then the next one is flex wrap. So it's a little bit confusing. So here's our flex direction, and here is our choices if we use flex direction. And I'll get to those in a minute, but I just want to show you that we have flex direction, which is from here. The next choice we have is flex wrap. So if I keep going down, there's flex direction, and I keep going down. These are all the descriptions for the row, column, row reverse. So we have flex direction, and it has its values. And then if we keep going down, we'll find the next property, which will be the flex wrap. And flex wraps has these 3 possible values. And so if you continue on scrolling down, then you'll see there's something that we can apply to the parent, and then these are the choices that the values that we can apply to that particular property, justify content, etc. So let me kind of point that out, and then we're going to go back and look at some of these a little bit more independently. All right, so the point was, let me kind of reiterate, if I have a flex parent, then I can apply a flex direction on the parent. And if I look down here, these are my 4 choices for the values for flex direction. And it should say what the default is. So the default is row is the default, which means if we don't apply anything, row is going to be rendered by default. I still don't understand what you're talking about. I get it. So let's do this. I'm going to do an example. So one of our choices is row, one is column, one is row reverse. So let's just play that. I'm just going to copy and paste so I don't get all those pop-ups with IntelliSense over here. And I'm going to choose row. But it says one of my choices is column. So I'm going to change this back to column. And let's see what that does to our page here. So if I change that back to column, oh, no, flex direction column. Oh, it's doing exactly what, sorry. So like it's not doing it because I'm back to the original. So it looks like the original, but they're all back in columns, right? So let me put this back to row, which is the default, and show you what it's doing. Okay. So I can set up my elements either to be in a row, and yes, they're taking the whole width, but let's just kind of deal with this for a moment. So I can take out a row, or I can make them be a column. So those are my choices, and you can see that that's happening. So some of the other ones are, for example, row reverse and column reverse. Let me just copy this just so you can see it happening. So if I put in one of the other values, then you're going to see it's going now this direction. And the other one was column reverse. So we'll put that in here. And this is really how you're just going to have to learn it, or the best way to learn it is just sort of play with all of the different options and sort of see what it does as a result. So I'm going to put this back to row, but I also want to remind you that, let me see, there we go, that it is the default. So the point of the default is if I don't put it here at all, if I remove it, that is the behavior that's going to be rendered automatically, right? If I put it in there, it's going to be exactly the same. If I leave it off, the default simply means if you don't define it, this is what is going to be rendered. All right, so I'm going to go back to W3 Schools and then just remind myself that I can then do flex direction, and flex direction is on the parent, and there's 4 values, 4 valid values that I can apply to flex direction, and we tried them to each one just to kind of see how it would respond. So I'm going to move on to the next one. There's row reverse. And so our next property is going to be the flex wrap property. And my 3 choices there are no wrap, wrap, and wrap reverse. So let's kind of explore that. So I'm going to come back in here. Let's see, let's copy and paste so I don't have to. So I'm going to take this flex wrap and I'm going to put it here, and let's see what happens. All right, so flex wrap. I'm going to change this to wrap because I think that's easier to demonstrate. So when I have wrap, what will happen is, well, nothing seems to be happening. Well, that's true until I bring my browser window, or you can think about this being on a phone, till I bring my browser window down lower. So when I bring my browser window to a smaller viewport, if the element no longer fits width-wise, it's going to jump down to the bottom. So I also want to show this to you real quick. So I'm going to go to, and there's a reason for the future why I'm dealing with this. So if I go to my inspect tool and I click on layout, you should see this word flexbox now. And if I go down and find my menu, now you'll start to see that it's recognizing that this is a flex element. And it's even kind of telling me a little bit about that. And then if I open it up, I can see these are all the flex items. So I'm going to click on that element that says it's flexed. And now I'm going to see a little bit something different here. I'm going to toggle this button on and off so that way I can see some of these grid lines, which are going to help in later videos or later moments for us. You can change the color of your grid. So mine is purple. You can change your color of your grid lines here. You can see that I have all of these are outlined, and then I have this extra space over here that's kind of hash marked. And then if I click on each individual element, I'm going to do that. And what you're going to see is their widths are going to be different depending on whatever content they have. Meaning that, for example, this one is, box 1 is 500 pixels. If I go to box 2, oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the height, 90. This one, it seemed kind of big. This one's 94 pixels wide. This one is 90 pixels wide. This one is, you get the point, 113 pixels. So they are being the width of their content solely, the width of their content solely. And so if I bring this window down below the ability for all of those widths to fit within this space, then the next one got popped down, right? So that's going to have meaning to us here in a little bit. But some of these don't really have any meaning. For example, wrap, if I had this, let's go back to flex direction, and we had column. Like column doesn't really wrap, so it doesn't really lend itself to a wrap, right? There's not really a wrap that works here. So some of these you just kind of have to play around with and think about what it's doing so you can sort of piece together, well, why isn't anything happening? Well, it's a column, so therefore it doesn't really wrap when the page gets smaller because they are by default up and down. Where is it going to wrap to? But if I put in row and we have wrap, then we realize that they will wrap down and go down below. Okay. Unless you had one of our other options was no wrap. So if we had no wrap in here, now this will make sense. No wrap. And then if we look at it, we're saying we don't want it to wrap. We always want it to take up what's that? Horizontal spacing. Okay. So again, just kind of exploring your different choices. Let's see what wrap reverse is. And this is what this is the best way to learn it, is just to try the different property values and see what would happen as a result. Wrap reverse, so that means if I brought this lower, oh, then we have it coming the other direction. So, all right, so we'll just keep going when looking at some of these other properties now. I'm going to expand this back and look back at our next choice here. All right, so the next one says, there's our flex wrap, and those are our choices, no wrap, wrap, and wrap reverse, so we've played with those already. What's next? Flex flow is a shorthand for flex direction and flex wrap. All right, so all that means is instead of having both of these, then we can just have flex flow. We just put them both together, row and wrap. Okay, I'm not going to do that on our screen. I think you get the idea. So we can either do both or we can do a shortcut. All right, let's look at justify content. Justify content is used to align the flex items when they do not use all available space on the main axis horizontally. Okay, so let's see how that works. So I'm just going to try some different ones and see how it works. Also, let's see. Okay, so I'm going to put this here and just try it. Justify content center. Let's see what will happen. Okay. Justify content center. That makes sense. Now I see what it does. I don't really have to explain that. I think it kind of makes sense. I'm going to let you play with some of these on your own. I'm going to try space between just to kind of see how it works. I'm going to put this on here so I can see them at the same time. Space between, and you can see what it's doing. Space around is just going to put a gap on the outside of them and space them evenly. So now they're being spaced evenly, and we've got a little gap on the side. All right, let's just keep scrolling down here. So justify content, I would encourage you to play with those different values just so you can see how they work. And then I'm going to scroll past all of them. And by the way, flex start is the default. So we're back to that same scenario, being aware of the default. If I didn't put in a justify content space around and get these values, what would happen is it's going to take the default, which was to do the start. So now it's moving back over here to the edge. So always pay attention to, I wonder what the default is, and they're always labeled here. Sometimes it's easier to find than others. Flex start is the default for justify content. All right, let's keep moving down to the next property, and I'm going to go to align items. So align items has 6 different options, and I'm going to look to see which one was the default. And if I go down far enough, I will find out that stretch is the default. So let's kind of do align items there. I'll put stretch in. What is some of my other choices? Flex end. So I'm going to put stretch here so I can see what stretch does because that's the default. Okay. And then it said, sorry, I forgot what it was. Flex end, I think. Yeah, flex dash end. Let's change this to flex end and just see what the difference is. And so what you're going to see is now it is not taking up the full height. So I purposely left this area gray. Let me kind of show you that I did this here. So I tried to make this menu a certain height. I made the menu 500 So that way we can see when I had the stretch, they took up the whole height of their parent. But if we're changing it to something different like flex end, they're no longer taking up their full height. So you have different properties along those lines. Flex end, stretch is the default, baseline. So there's other options there, and I'll let you play around with them. I'm going to ignore for the moment align content because that one's a little bit confusing because we're starting to talk about different axes, and I think for now we're just going to keep here. And that's the last of our parent or container properties. So go ahead and play around with those so you can see how that works. And in my next video, we'll do the children properties.